Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We are looking at a truly incredible underdog story today. How Amin, a student who was facing massive academic failure, completely turned it around to build a highly paid, top-tier engineering career. It absolutely shatters the whole myth of innate talent, and we're going to break down exactly how he pulled it off.
Let's look at the sheer contrast here. On one side, you have Amin's absolute rock-bottom moment academically, scoring a dismal 6 out of 20 in math and physics. I mean, he was failing hard. But then on the other side, just a short time later, he's bringing home a monthly salary of 3,000 euros net, effectively doubling his income in just 1 month as a highly respected engineer. So how in the world do you bridge a gap like that? How do you go from failing your exams to completely skipping the junior level?
Well, that brings us to part one, the collapse and the pivot. You know, Amin wasn't always failing. In fact, he actually graduated high school in France with top honors. But when he entered this grueling engineering prep program right as the pandemic hit, his grades just completely collapsed. He went from being the absolute best in his class to scoring under an 8 out of 20. He felt what they call in France, under the water. It's like you're diving and you just cannot emerge to take a breath. It was pure overwhelming panic. Now, a lot of people in that situation would just throw their hands up, assume they aren't talented enough for tech, and quit. But Amin, instead of blaming some lack of innate talent, he decided his approach was what was broken. So he decided to completely dismantle and rebuild his entire learning system from scratch. And he did this by building a 5-step, incredibly actionable reading hack. Let's walk through it because it's brilliant. Step 1, read the text. Step 2, hit an unknown word. Step 3, and this is where almost everyone messes up, stop immediately. Right there. People usually just let unfamiliar jargon slide by, right? Not Amin. Step 4, define and truly understand that word or concept so well that you could explain it to someone else. And finally, step 5, only then do you move on. This simple, forced habit of pausing for comprehension literally stopped his brain from glossing over complex jargon. The result? He went from failing grades to eventually scoring a perfect 20 out of 20 in his third-year mathematics program. Talk about a pivot.
All right, let's move on to part 2, mindset over technical skills. Because getting good grades is really only half the battle, right? Amin needed to lock down an apprenticeship, so he applied for a networking and security role, despite the fact that he barely even knew what an IP address was at the time. So how do you pass a highly technical interview with literally zero skills? Picture this. He's sitting across from 2 hiring managers, and they just start throwing out these demanding, high-level buzzwords. Kubernetes, Ansible, bash scripting. It's a terrifying moment for anyone, but especially for a student with a virtually blank resume. But his response, it was completely brilliant in its honesty. He just looked at them and said, I don't know, but I can learn. No faking it, no pretending to be some seasoned expert. And you know what? One of the interviewers actually told him later that this was exactly what they were hoping to hear. They weren't expecting him to be a Kubernetes master on day one. What they were looking for was a bulletproof mindset. They hired him right then and there because he proved he was absolutely not scared of the unknown. So he gets the job, and he's doing basic manual test automation. But then he meets a mentor, a guy he referred to as the real engineer. This DevOps colleague was just incredible. He was effortlessly managing cloud infrastructure, Terraform, Docker, and Kubernetes across the whole company. Literally, if this guy wasn't there, the entire project would grind to a halt. Seeing that level of effortless mastery over such complex systems gave Amin a very concrete, very ambitious goal. He knew instantly, I want to be that guy.
Which leads us straight into part 3, investing in structured learning.
Amin quickly realized that just casually shadowing his senior mentor wasn't going to cut it. He needed a serious plan to escape that cold water feeling of being totally overwhelmed by technologies he didn't understand. So he made a huge commitment, a 1,600 euro financial investment straight out of his own pocket for professional boot camps. Now you might be asking, why pay when YouTube is full of free tutorials? Simple, he wanted to buy back his time. He knew that piecing together a bunch of fragmented, unvetted videos would probably take him 3 years. He wanted a trusted, highly structured source to accelerate his growth right now.
And he went all in, devouring an absolute mountain of structured learning paths. I mean, we're not just talking about one class. He ran through IT fundamentals, a massive DevOps bootcamp, a dedicated GitLab course, and even a DevSecOps bootcamp. And he didn't just sit around waiting for free time to magically appear. He used up all his paid vacations from work and leveraged a massive block of free time during a linguistics day program to just rapidly, aggressively level up his skills.
And that brings us to a huge takeaway in part 4, concepts instead of tools.
This specific philosophy right here is what accelerated Amin's learning so far past his peers. You see, memorizing specific tools means you are starting from zero every single time your company switches software. But if you understand the underlying concepts, you can easily pick up any tool. And this brilliantly illustrates the point by learning the core concepts of CI/CD pipelines in his boot camp using a tool called Jenkins. Amin effortlessly switched over to using GitLab at his actual job. Sure, the interface was different, but the fundamental concepts were exactly the same.
And this deep conceptual knowledge survived the ultimate real-world test, migrating air-gapped, bare metal servers for the French army. This was the absolute hardest project he ever faced. We're talking a massive, highly confidential migration using complex architectures, VMware, compiling C++ projects, dealing with CMake, all in a totally restricted, disconnected environment. But because he truly understood the fundamental concepts behind the infrastructure, he thrived. He was successfully debugging things right where others would have just completely frozen up.
So how did he fit this all in? That brings us to part 5, master your time.
I know you're probably wondering, how does one single person accomplish all of this while working full-time as an apprentice, going to engineering school, and even serving as a class representative? Well, it requires an intense, almost clock-like daily schedule. His morning commutes, which were often an hour and a half each way, were dedicated solely to cybersecurity reading. His afternoons, locked in for boot camp deep work. And the weekends, this is wild. Massive, 15-hour continuous learning sessions. Hitting that level of output requires sheer discipline and serious sacrifice. Amin completely cut out video games and socializing during these sprints. He treated his time like a precious commodity, investing every spare drop into his future.
And Amin has this really poetic, but honestly brutal analogy for this. He says an engineer is like a flower. If you don't put water or sunbeams, it's going to die. Continuous learning is that water and sun. Even after you get your fancy degree, if you stop learning and you get lazy, your skills are going to stagnate and your career will just wilt. You have to continuously feed your brain to stay relevant in this industry.
Which brings us to our final section, part 6, finding your true why. Because let's be real, to maintain that intense 15-hour weekend level of dedication, you cannot be fueled just by anxiety or a fear of falling behind. That kind of negative pressure is just going to burn you out eventually. It requires deeply rooted, intrinsic motivation. You have to genuinely, truly want to reach the goal at the finish line. And when you find that why, you get the empirical payoff. For Amin, it was 3,000 euros a month. He didn't just survive his apprenticeship. That incredibly demanding senior colleague enthusiastically recommended him for a permanent DevOps role. When he sat down with the manager for the final interview, they didn't ask him a single technical question. There was no need. His portfolio, his GitHub, and his relentless work ethic spoke completely for themselves. He validated multiple certificates in record time, and his monthly salary doubled basically overnight.
So the crucial question I want to leave you with today is this. What is your why, and what are you willing to sacrifice today to build your system for tomorrow? Remember, Amin wasn't born some tech genius. He built a flawless learning system through raw discipline, smart financial investments in his own education, and an absolutely bulletproof mindset. It is time to drop the myth of innate talent, grab this exact blueprint, and start building your own success story today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.